stories in a visual sequential art environment. And something I want to talk about and focus on with this panel is that there's a lot of people who make great art. A lot of people who draw real goods, but drawing comics and telling a story in a sequential art fashion is a completely different skill set layered on top of just being able to draw well and that kind of skill set. So what we're going to be talking about really in this panel is what it takes to, the kind of thought process that goes into it, the additional skill sets, the teamwork that goes into it, and sort of the tricks of the trade that these guys have developed over time in drawing comics. So I'm just going to start down here with Jeremy. I'm going to let you each go down and introduce yourselves. I want you to tell us who you are and some of the notable stuff that you've worked on.
I'm Jeremy Haun. Most recently I worked on a book called The Beauty for Image Comics. I also did Constantine for a while, and Batwoman, and a bunch of stuff.
I'm Freddie Williams II. I wrote a book called The DC Comics Guide to Digitally Drawing Comics. I drew Robin for a little bit in The Flash, and most recently I drew Batman Ninja Turtles.
My name is Texeira. I think I'm most known for Ghost Rider, Wolverine, and Punisher. I've done a whole bunch of stuff. He-Man. I can't even call. But I've been around for about 35 years. So,
I'm Brian Hurtt. I'm most known, if known, for Six Gun, which I work on with Comicon. We're just wrapping up our 50th issue of that series. And I've done a lot of other stuff. I've been doing this for almost 15 years. I've had a lot of work in the past. But the day I've been a lot of projects with Oni, did some work for DC. But yeah, I mainly stick with my creator projects now.
Okay. So for the purposes of this panel, we're going to be discussing this from the standpoint of an artist who's working as part of a writer-artist team, and the workflow that you have with that, or if you have editors and stuff too. At the end, if you guys also work on some of your own stuff where you write and draw your own thing, we can talk about that too. But for this, let's just talk about mostly working with a writing team. So the first thing I want to ask is where did you guys learn the visual language of comics? I mean, obviously, you probably grew up reading it, or got into comics and you learned it by looking on a page. But it's one thing to see it, and it's another thing to do it. So where did you guys first learn that? How did you learn the craft? Let's just start down here with Jeremy. Just move on down the line.
Switch up. That's a big question. Describe everything that's not purple.
It's easy to talk first. I honestly, I came to it, like a lot of us, just reading a ton of comics and studying them, and you always latch on to those people that influence the work you do, and the guys that do it right. Whether you're studying Eisner or Kirby, or looking at the work that even guys like Mignola do, those all really influence me and help build the language that I use even today. When I got started, there weren't a lot of tutorials. It was pre-internet, really, right as the internet was starting, and so we were lucky to have a couple of how-to books out there. But I absorbed those, but it was just a lot of looking at stuff, figuring it out, and going from there.
Yeah, and I guess I should elaborate on that, but it's what books, did you take classes, did you go to college for it, did you just, obviously you practiced, but who were you looking at for it? So you mentioned some of those already.
Yeah, I mean, I went to a little bit of college, though. I always wanted to have a chance to go to Cooper School or something like that, and I was a broke kid living in the Midwest, so I didn't really get to do that. Again, it was just looking at those, as simple even as like how to draw comics the Marvel way, through Eisner's book, and I guess the Scott McCloud had a few of those. But like I said, it was all just kind of piecing together the things. I would have loved to have had YouTube.
Yeah, actually, Jeremy just mentioned the 3 perfect books for you to mention, and that was great, which is How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. The Will Eisner has a couple of different more of a yellow color cover, and one has a more red one out of my memory. And then also the Scott McCloud Understanding Comics and also Reinventing Comics. Those are all really good to check out. And I think that also if you're looking at comic book artists, or if you're looking at comic books that are easy to read, there's just something that you just naturally understand. Your eye just falls through the page, which is you don't get confused. Which panel do I go to next? Who is talking? Who is it that I'm looking at? Like, if there's a silhouette on the page, you're looking past that person's shoulder, and you're like, who is that again? I'm not sure. If you're having those kind of problems, you know, that's because somebody has kind of messed up in the visual storytelling department. And so if you find an artist who you can easily read through the page, Frank Miller is a really good example, Will Eisner, of course, and there's many others, but you can learn a lot just from looking at how they stage a panel and that sort of thing. I did not go to college. I'm not saying that I'm not recommending against anyone who goes to college, but for me, I've always been very much a stay in my room and work and study and draw. That's my main interest, and that's my whole life, I guess. So I wasn't distracted much by video games and hanging out with my friends and getting into trouble. So for me, that was kind of my college experience. Some people need a more structured environment, so there's nothing wrong with that. And also, if I had access to the internet, then that would have been great. But there's not even a lot of stuff about eye flow and visual storytelling online that I've noticed, so it is kind of hard. Recently, Carl Potts put out a book called, it's a very long title, it's something like the DC Comics Guide to Visual Storytelling or something, and he talks about eye flow. I recommend picking that one up as well as the older books we recommended.
What's that? Did you see the Tomorrow's book that just came out about the sequential stuff?
I have not seen it.
It has a Stelford section on realistic.
Oh, okay.
At some point, we'll look it up.
Yeah.
And I'll email all of you.
I don't know, I grew up watching documentaries on Walt Disney and the laid out artists who did all the framework, and I thought as a kid, God, I'd love to do some of that. And as I grew up, it was just Kirby. He got right to the action. And so no matter what, if there was no language at all, we could still read the storyline. And then, I don't know, I started showing my work at 14 and didn't get until 19, but I tutored under Rich Buckler, who taught me the basics of real storytelling. And again, a mix of Neil Adamson, Kirby, real structure, and simplicity, and then you can add all the detail after. So, and then I did a lot of painting and art students league academy. So I got a mix of painting and comic books. So I'm a little bit of a mess emotionally and artistically, but it's all good, you know.
It's a beautiful mess.
Yes, it's a wonderful mess. So,
Brian, what was the question? So basically, what were your learning blocks?
Yeah. You know, you're right. There's a difference between drawing and storytelling, and I've always drawn. I've always loved comic books. You know, been steeped in them from time I was a little kid. But I really learned a lot of my storytelling, partially intuitively from reading the comics, but also I get a lot of my language from film as well. And I learned a lot on the job. I didn't realize what I was lacking as a comic artist until I actually had to start drawing scripts and working as a storyteller. And then I realized, well, that's not clear. I have to fix that, or I have to make this work. But yeah, it was a lot of learning on the job, and constantly trying to simplify things and yeah, clarity, making things that are reading well. Yeah, no formative education. Like everybody here said, we're all sort of pre-internet guys. There wasn't a lot to go to, and even when you did find stuff, it's not usually focused on the storytelling. It's focused on technique, drawing, and the tools and that sort of stuff. I read everything I get my hands on, but there really wasn't much for storytelling.
I'm just curious, with all of you guys, have any of you worked as part of studio groups, or you've mostly been at your home office? I mean, have you been as part of like an art collective or anything like that, where you shared with other people and learned from them?
There's been a few, mainly just at home by myself, and there's been a few people who have worked in my studio or I've gone and kind of been, you know, had a walk-on role in their studio for like a week or something, but the vast majority is just solo for me.
Yeah, I was showing my work to DC Comics at 17 and 15, and I just wouldn't take no for an answer, and so I just, all my summers were spent trying to get into the industry instead of, you know, chasing after girls. I realized that I wanted to really...
That's why I got the comics.
No, girls, now they love comics because of the movies. Back in the 70s, there were really bad movies about superheroes. So it was really about trying to get into an industry that I hardly had to work at. I just did drawings and get paid for it. I love this job.
I love how you describe it as not work.
It's not work. It's my mother said the first time I got a check at DC, wait, hold on. They're giving you $500 to do whatever you've been getting in trouble for in school, drawing in the back of the books all your life. I go, yeah, Mom, finally. And then I moved out at 19. But no, after showing a lot of work at DC for 3 years, 4 years, at around 17, Richard Buckler needed a background artist. So I really started to get my real sense of what final lines had to go on the paper, not to do too much and just enough. And those took years. I even assisted him on the backgrounds of Superman versus Shazam. And that's like way before you guys time, maybe not yours, but everybody else's. And then eventually I got into working with House of Mysteries, sort of like new talent showcases back then. But it was always, and then I studied continuity for about a year under Neil Adams, and he's a taskmaster. But then you really learn your skills. But after that, then yeah, it was mostly on my own. Then I taught a few other students, a few other artists in the industry, like Rodney Ramos, and a few other artists who have come through my studio. But now I just work on my own thing. So.
It's kind of an interesting thing though, like starting out as a background artist and learning that way, because you started drawing all of the stuff that we hate drawing. You know, you get so many people that come up and they have these really kind of dynamic, fun figures, and then the backgrounds are never quite as, they don't quite mash up, they don't quite look as good. Right. I think starting out learning backgrounds and learning about perspective, you've dealt, ridiculous amounts of perspective and kind of breaking down, like the backgrounds themselves. And I think it's such an important thing to learn, and having a foundation like that's kind of fantastic.
Yeah. Perspective is probably the most complicated. And once you get past that, everything starts, it opens your eyes to what the world really looks like. So it takes a while for people to, and then there's anatomy and light source and all those other aspects of dynamic storytelling.
I think you hit on something interesting there, which is that when you've got people who are learning art to begin with, especially when they're drawing pinups or drawing their favorite characters, they're drawing the stuff that's most fun and the stuff they're most excited about. But a comic artist has to draw everything.
I remember in my first script, like, oh, you also have to draw the hand on the doorknob, turning the door, like that, all the boring stuff that tells the story. That's important and integral to what's going on in the scene. That's like, oh, it was a wake-up call. But, and I was working on, this is Queen Country, which is a sort of, if you're not familiar with it, is a spy series, but a very grounded spy series, not much action. But that made me such a better artist and very fast, because I had to draw everything and I had to really learn to tell the story, not through action, as in pow action, but through small gestures and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, you probably also discover that for the artist, they can write one line that can mean 40 hours of work for the writer.
Right,
the writer can be like, and the queen and all of her forces go out of the...
Oh yeah, I would get normal scripts for the next 4 pages they fight.
And the writer gets paid for all 4 of those pages.
It feels eventually really good though when you start writing. You just recently. You started writing? Yeah, But when you get to flip that around and write that stuff for somebody else.
I'm the worst.
It feels really good.
I'm horrible for writing, because I kind of write for me and I like a lot of panels. Yeah. And I can just feel I'm breaking people's spirits.
Yeah. Like the Army of the Damned flying on biplanes.
I would draw it.
Yes. Okay.
To me, that sounds awesome. I would love to draw that. But yeah, no, when I get a script, I'm often, say it's a 6-panel page, I'm often adding a panel or two. When I'm writing a script, I'm already adding those panels, so they're in, so all my pages are always like 8 or 9 panels.
But you have to make it look like you are interested and lovingly illustrating like a bus station.
Yeah. Well, it all has to have the
Shopping
same,
mall.
right, everything has to have the same amount of effort into it.
You can kind of see when certain guys get really bored too. They're like, they don't want to draw that. Like, oh, that's, so I always feel this obligation to not check.
I can never
draw the toast.
I got one
really
speed.
well.
Yeah. There's something that's always stuck out to me, and there was an X-Men comic back in the day when it was like the third page or third section of it was this big double-page spread, and it was like in Genosha, and like a million people are supposed to be staying out there, and the artist didn't get the page done, and it literally just kind of fades off the side and sort of a color wash, and there's little triangles in places where they were supposed to put other people in, and that got published in an X-Men book. And I remember looking at that being like, this was a tough page. I could see why this would destroy you, but at the same time, like,
well, at least now with digital, you could at least copy a bunch of people and paste them all over.
Smart object the hell out of that, right? Yeah.
Which is something I learned from Freddie Williams' book.
Brian, you started off on something that I want to get into here, and what I really want to talk about is initial process. So when you guys get the script from the writer or from your editor, whoever passes that thing along, what's your process of breaking that down? Like I want to know this like individually from like, are you thumbnailing, you doing layouts, are you jumping right in and drawing? What's your method?
When I get a script, well, the first thing I do is I read it. But I'll print it up, and then I'll sit down in like an armchair with a pencil, and I'll read it, and I'll make some initial. I don't do any thumbnails or anything, like imagery, things that pop out to me, or a certain angle that catches my eye. Like, oh, I want to remember that, and I'll jot that on the script itself. And then probably not the same day, the next day, I'll sit down with the script again, and that's when I start going page by page and doing the breakdowns, the thumbnails. I work probably 2 by 3 inches or so, something like that, for my thumbnails. And that's where all the work is in comics, is doing the thumbnails, all the thinking, the thought process that goes into those pages. Because if you get it wrong there, you screwed everything, nothing else matters. But yeah, and then I go from there to pencils, to inks. I used to do pencil whole book and ink whole book, but now I just do a page at a time. But yeah, that's it. But yeah, for me, thumbnailing a book is at least a day's work, sometimes 2 days, because I will just you get burnt out sometimes. So I'll just do like 11 pages or so, and then put it down and come back to it.
Well, that sounds like what you're saying now is that you do kind of the whole page at once to help kind of stop the monotony, since you are inking yourself, so it's not
yeah, I don't know, I can't remember what happened. It happened sometime during 6th grade, because like I said, I used to do the whole thing. Because there's benefits to penciling the whole book once, because you can get into a rhythm, and the pages will start to get better, and probably a little faster. And same thing with the inking. Yeah, I don't know. I think I just it's a time management issue. I know I have to do a page a day. So if I sit down with a blank piece of paper and it's done at the end of the day, then I did my work. I did at least as much as I need to do. So
when you get done with the thumbnails, is that something like you're shooting a scan to the writer then and being like, hey, does this look right? Or
no,
is it just for you?
I don't even tell the show the editor. No, I got to the point. I hate doing thumbnails for other people because I have to draw differently. I have to put a lot more time into those thumbnails because I can make sense of what I'm looking at, but you probably can't make sense of them. But I'm lucky in that, again, I'm doing my creator own work, and I don't have any. There's no gatekeepers. It's my comic. So, and again, I work with Cullen, and at this point we've done about 70 issues of comics together, and we have an understanding. Like he completely trusts me. There used to be times I was making a big change on the page, like, hey, I need to bump this panel to the next page, it works better. I'd run it by him, I just call him and explain it, but now he doesn't, I don't have to do that, for years. I just do what needs to be done.
Are you terrified when you get like a new editor, somebody you don't, because you can skip the thumbnails process with some people or whatever it is, but then you're like, oh, I have to actually really tighten these thumbnails up and actually show them.
It's been so long since I've had to show anybody. It really has been like 7 years.
So you're spoiled.
I'm kind of a diva. I won't do it. I I've actually told editors, like, no.
It works though.
You might send me some sketches of the cover, or send me some thumbnails. No, I'll turn it in and that'll be it. You'll see it. Don't make my job hard. You don't pay me enough. What it comes down to.
So Mark, what's your process?
It varies. When you're doing a monthly, you know, I do, once I read a panel, I'll just, like was stated, I'll just do an image and then I'll put it together on a smaller piece of paper, but, and then I'll transfer it loosely. I used to do an autograph, which is projection, but now I just sort of interpret my own layouts. And yeah, you get chances where you have to show it to the artists, but I mean to the editors. But yeah, I love to just do my own thing now. So once you learn basics, yeah. But it is annoying when you get a brand new editor that's just learning.
But you have to teach them, like, no.
Yeah. Oftentimes, brand new editors feel like they're doing a good job if they are constantly interjecting their own opinion and their own tastes upon your work. So they'll give you pages of notes on things.
That goes
because
for writers and artists.
They feel like I'm doing a good job because now I've shaped this into something that I like more.
That's a whole other subject, but yeah, I sometimes, I have a lot of friends who obviously do comic work with big companies, and sometimes I'm like, they hired you for the job, why don't they just let you do what you do? Why do they have to keep?
Well, I think it's important sometimes as creators to find an editor or a group that you work with and stick with them like
And my work process is the almost polar opposite of what you described, which is I
draw the page and read the script.
Oh, that's not what I was supposed to do at all. No, but once I get to the roughs, I always send roughs to editors, and so far I'm really fortunate that I've only ever had one editor that was brand new and who wanted to interject everything that they had in their mind, and that was a pain. But for the most part, and you know, for the last several years, it's been the editor just goes, okay, that's cool, okay, that's cool. But when it comes to covers, I actually like having a tiebreaker because oftentimes I'll have 4 or 5 ideas, and I like to have somebody who says, I like this more because of this, and then I'll say, oh,
see, that's why I don't work in illustration. I don't want anybody, like, I hate having to come up with 4 or 5 concepts, and you know there's only one that you know is good for me. I'm like, there's only one, why do I have to show you all 4?
But if you send 4, they're gonna pick
They always pick the worst
crap.
one.
That's why you throw in that ringer that you're like, well, that's just like the ugly one, and then they're like, oh, that's the one right there. And you're like, no.
I come from the world of graphic design that is not unique to comics.
Yeah.
You send the client,
That's
or
why
you once in a crappy one, they will pick the crappy
That's
one.
why they do that kind of work. Better money, but it's not worth it.
I don't know, I just had, I mean, the cover roughs for the new project that I'm working on that hasn't been announced, the cover that just got approved, it was greatly helped by the input of the editor, and because the layout they chose, and then I submitted what I call a wireframe, which is like a type breakdown drawing, and they had a couple of notes, and they were absolutely right.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I've drawn a lot of really bad covers. I probably could use some notes on. I'm saying I don't run by it. But I have, this is kind of going back to a studio situation. I've worked on my own, you know, had a little home office for forever until about 2 years ago. Now I share an office with another artist. And it is great just to be able to walk over to his desk and, hey, look at this. And he was my friend anyway, so we'd see each other maybe once a week and exchange ideas and that sort of thing. But being in the same room and being able to bounce ideas and stuff off, have a big dry erase board and go, does this work? You know, actually, I've done that a couple times, especially with humor. Laying out a joke from panel to panel, going, do these beats work? And sometimes it's just nice to get that sort of bounce back, that feedback.
Jeremy, what's your flow?
I get a script, kind of like Brian does. I get my pipe like he does. I read it once all the way through, and then I put it down and I panic. I'm like, I can't draw this. I don't know. I don't understand. There's so much here, and then I you know, kind of relax. Take a shower.
Forget.
Yeah.
Is that like every time you get a script is when you take a shower?
Yes.
Shower, yes.
For a long time, I would actually read the script right before I go to bed, like of the evening, And then, but I started having such anxiety. Well, like, I'm like, I just don't know how I'm gonna draw 30,000, people fighting, or whatever it is. So I started, midday reading, and then reading it like a couple times, and then starting my thumbnails. And I think that reading it and kind of playing it like a movie in my head, really, the whole thing, you're watching it, and you're seeing all of the story progressing. Right?
Well, that reminds of what you're saying. That reminds me, because I think you say read it several times. I forget when I'm doing a page. I have it printed out script, even as I'm drawing it. I've got the storytelling down, the movements, the plot beats, but I like to read it for the dialogue and get the feeling what the characters are thinking, or because I can't make out the thumbnail. I can't.
Right. And that helps the acting, I think.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The little bits. I do. I format after I've read it a couple times. I format a script so that I have that written page of script on the left side, and then on the right side I have my thumbnail.
You're working digitally though?
I put all that together, in Photoshop, print it out, and I draw it, and then I scan it. I'm like your hybrid method, yeah. You guys hear fancy language. But I slightly larger than like a index card size, and then I lay out my thumbnails there, and that's what, like Ryan was saying, like, that's where all of your storytelling and all of the important bits really happen. If I hate getting on a tight deadline where I can't really spend I'll spend 4 days or so just working on my thumbnails and really tightening down the storytelling and getting everything where I want it to be.
What do you say you do with your thumbs? Do you work directly off your thumbs? Blow them up or anything?
Then I scan them in, and then I take them into Photoshop, and I build like a page template out of that.
And then you print that out?
And then I print it out. Yeah, it's lots of printing and scanning.
Oh, I can't. So are you printing out like 11 by 17?
Yeah.
And
I get the.
I know live.
Yeah.
My thumbs are so crap, I can't.
Well, mine. There's. I'll show you.
I know, I get it. It bounces out. I'm putting less time up front.
Whenever I send out that email about the book, then I'll also
everybody
include my thumbs. Really, it's all about the storytelling for me there, and then I gather any reference that I need and all that junk, and print it out, and then just start drawing. And the strange thing that I do, though, I will sometimes sit down with the sequence that scares me most and draw that first. Like, I'll try to get that out of the way, because as the deadline progresses, you procrastinate, and you're down to the wire, and you have to, I really like to get the stuff that's really, really difficult out first, and kind of get it out of my system. So sometimes there'll be a double-page spread that I'll have to do that's insane, or 2 pages in a 2-page block.
Do you guys jump around a lot? I do page 1, page 2. Everything's sequential.
I will literally draw a panel. It's like this is gonna take me 8 hours to draw this panel, and I'll do that, and then I'll go again.
Well, that kind of brings me to the next question I wanted to tackle here was picking the big moments in scripts, because as you go through and you're building each page, I mean, unless you have a really static square page, you're usually going to have a big moment, a big focus, something that breaks out a little different, that dominates the flow. So as you're in that process, like, is that something that's being indicated in the script, or is that something you guys are acting out yourselves? Are you discovering it in the process? Like, this is the moment of action that needs to dominate the page?
Both. I mean, generally, a good comic script, and then Cullen, I think, is a very good comic writer. Those beats are in there, and then they're in the right places on the page turns, this and that. But you still sometimes you'll be working on something. You go, you know what? I need to emphasize this. Like, things will come out to you, and that's part of your job as a storyteller too, to add to the story or to help flesh it out. But yeah, so it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, I look at a script, and if it's it depends. Sometimes they're working up to a certain climax, or sometimes it's just action, and you have to make the decision whether it's going to be a punch or whether it's a lead up to an explosion, or so there are different approaches to the same, even the same storyline. Hitchcock or Spielberg, Spielberg boom, Hitchcock tension. So, but most of the time I'll find one panel that really jumps out at you, and the rest of them are just sort of like talk panels. So I'll make those smaller unless there's lots of dialogue, then I'll just turn it into a silhouette and let the dialogue take over. So there are very many, and that's where you get that Wally Wood, I don't know if you've seen those examples, but
I used to have that
a writer wants to go on forever, and you go, okay, this is what, two little dots on the horizon, and let the writer do whatever he wants. And then you get, then you do extreme close-ups with one giant eyeball and it's up forever. So there are all kinds of tricks.
What Mark is describing is something called Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work, and it's like a piece of artboard turned on its side. It's just a bunch of, it's a quickly drawn, but it's just a whole bunch of different shots where it's like a reflection, a silhouette, a close-up, something real big in the foreground, and it's looking past it like a hand is big in the foreground or something. And those are really useful. And there's actually another page that he did that doesn't have that, it's not on the 22 panels, but it's another page that he did that has like 5 or 6 more. It's like a lesser scene. Yeah, sequel. It's just interesting. It's interesting to see a formula of a way to just give you ideas, like a series of shorthands of this isn't. There's nothing that's really inspiring me, so I can just try to apply this formula. It's almost like you're applying math to it.
And I wish I had seen that page like 20 years ago. Yeah. I'd already been doing comics while I got it. I was like, this is awesome. I was like, oh, I can have one. That one. Oh, that's a new one. That's interesting. But yeah, it's a great tool. It's such a simple thing,
Yeah. That actually dovetails really well into something I was going to ask you guys, which is what are the techniques that you lean on, the inspirations that you go back to, like if you get stuck on something, it sounds like
my own work.
What's that?
My own work's the only inspiration I need.
You've got 60 some odd issues of back issues to go back through. You're like, I'll just knock out that one from before.
You're just so good.
I'm that good.
I think for me, there's movies that I still like the visuals in. I love the first Alien film that has beautiful visuals, and even though I've seen it so many times, the suspense of it still gets me. I'm still engrossed in it. Back to the Future and Ghostbusters are also inspirational films. They're not as awesome visually, storytelling-wise. Like, I'm not looking at it for direct visual inspiration, but it's just gets my mind working in a different spot and kind of brings me out of the funk that I might be in while I'm drawing. Let's see, comic book-wise, I really like Arthur Adams stuff, Frank Miller, and Mike Mignola. Those are all great guys to look at, to be inspired by. And those can help just kind of get you out of, like, if there's like, let's say 10, to be generous, let's say there's 10 type of like framing devices or layouts that you tend to gravitate towards, and you're always looking for ways to kind of mutate those and change them and make them unique for certain things. But you can look at somebody else's and they'll just knock you right out of your own headspace. As long as they're really good, they'll knock you out of your own headspace and give you a new direction.
That's important. I know I do it. You get to a point where you follow rhythms and your storytelling rhythms, and you start doing the same sort of shots and the same sort of, and once you start recognizing it, then it's already probably way too late. But you need to try to shake it up, like Freddie said, and look out there for other inspiration.
There's an artist who will remain nameless that I recently looked at a bunch of his work, and it was like straight on shot of a face, profile of a face, straight on of a face, but slightly closer profile of a face. It was like when you're flipping through the pages, you could barely tell the difference. It was just almost every page. Now they were all really well drawn, but it was just so formulaic.
Dude, I'm sitting right here.
Nobody here.
Are there, what's a nightmare panel again? What's a page you get the script and you're like,
The classic thing is multiple actions in one panel. Like, I learned again, a writer that I won't name, very popular, well-known, well-regarded writer, but
Comicon.
Huh? That's a well-regarded writer. But no, he had a page where a guy slams the phone down and storms out of the room. I was like, that's not a normal panel, unless it's a family circus and the guy had little dots behind him, and slams the door too. Like, that's like 3 panels. But yeah, you get that a lot. That's why a lot you have to break things up. That's the only nightmare. I love drawing everything, so I don't get freaked out like Jeremy does.
Freak out in the beginning, and I crush it.
I had a double-page spread in Black Panther with 3 armies are fighting it, and I had to literally.
That sounds awesome.
One army was military, one had spears, and the other one, I can't recall if they had machetes. And Black Panther standing in the middle of the 3 armies converging. Oh, Lord, it must have been on that double-page spread for like 4 days. But it was over after that.
That's right.
It's torture. So yeah, you get these like, you know, hundreds of figures converging into one.
There was a team book. The first team book I ever drew was called JSA All Stars. I was new to team books, so was the writer named Matt Sturgis, and I give him a hard time about this, so I don't mind saying his name because he knows I always give him a hard time about it. But he would, in the first couple of issues, because neither of us were used to working on team books, neither of us really reined this in. There was just too much happening in every panel because he wanted to account for almost every character in every panel. So he would say, you know, panel 1, this event happens, or he would say panel 1, big panel, this event happens. Panel 2, big panel, this happens. Panel 3, huge panel, this thing happens.
Give that one big panel per page.
It's a
Right.
panel 8.
Yeah, huge, even huger panel. No, but it was, if I look at those pages now, it is just a complete mess of there was just too much happening in everything. I was trying to draw everything I could, so I didn't minimize the background, so it's just lots of figures, lots of backgrounds, and then words just all over the place. It's just too much. So by like issue 6, we started to figure it out, but by then, the sales were already really bad, so it was too late at that point.
Kind of similar. I was working on my second big Marvel project that I got on was New Excalibur, and both me and the writer were new guys working on it. The writer was Chris Claremont, and but every single page was just packed with you had Excalibur fighting against Dark Excalibur, plus these, and it was like 8 to 10 characters, and there were so many panels per page. It was ridiculous.
Just draw it.
Yeah, I did.
Shut up and draw it.
I tend to find that it's hard to do like the really iconic moments sometimes though. Like if you're asked to do a double splash page, which I kind of hate, or a single splash page, picking that one shot to really sell it. I would rather do a 12-panel page and like nail those little moments.
I
could do that all day long. Splash pages, I don't know, they're kind of boring.
That's a whole page you can be telling a story on. And instead you just got a big, it's great for art sales, because that's the page of myself.
But it's like going back and reading some of the stuff in the 90s, you're like, there's 12 splash pages in this comic.
The 90s.
I
You still have that problem.
Well, I had a page with Howard Mackey. He had Johnny Depp, not Johnny Depp. I'm thinking, not Johnny Blaze, but the other one. Storm.
Johnny Bravo?
Shut him out.
That's right. Anyway, he had 6 panels where he's just riding through the city. I'm like, really? This is like beyond boring. So I just did a shot of not Ghost Rider, but it wasn't Blaze, but let's say it's Blaze. Just riding on a motorcycle and a big suspended Ghost Rider above the skies beyond buildings. And he just laid out all 6 word balloons, and you can just read this and just take your time. So these 6 panels, we're just running through the city with a motorcycle.
But that kind of goes back to your
boring.
You do so much work as a painter, though, and so those iconic moments are kind of
posters. Yes, these moments where you just stop and breathe, because the rest of the story was just panels, and you get to the middle of the book and you're like, when can I just breathe? Just let it all go.
Well, and so when you get a script that's heavy on talking heads, conversations, bendis scripts where there's 5 million words in it, you know, how are you approaching?
That's a TV show.
What was that? Yeah. How are you approaching those scripts? How are you saying, okay, I've got to make this visually interesting. I need to make this flow. I need to leave room for the lettering. Like how much of, you know, when you're putting together, you're thinking about
All of it.
yeah, like, you know, how much of that conversation you have in your head, like where the hell is he going to put this stuff? Like how do you guys pick that out?
Yeah, I look for opportunities to condense panels. If it's super wordy, you cannot, or else you'll have just like this huge amount of dialogue and then these little bitty heads. But if there are opportunities to combine panels, that's nice. And then other than that, I mean, you will do some establishing stuff up front, and then after that, hone in. What I mean by that is like establishing shots so that you can see everybody in the room in their relationship. And then after that, start cutting into close-ups or medium close-ups that don't have a lot of backgrounds. That way, it just gives, and it's more like a single person's head, or maybe just past them you see the back of the head or the side of the face of the person you're talking to. That way, you're not trying to kill yourself on drawing a big crowd of people who are talking all at once. But I think ultimately it's the Lollywood's 22 panels. It's looking at that type of thing to constantly look for ways to kind of jazz up your page.
Talking at table is difficult.
Yeah.
Yes.
People sitting at a round table, making sure you know where everybody's at and who's in relation to each other. And
It's like those like Justice Society books where there's like 27 people in there. I think like with talking heads bits, it's all about giving people like little bits of business things to actually do to keep yourself entertained. Like if you can have somebody.
Well, that's acting.
Yeah. You just work. Like that's the stuff that's fun to do. You can have somebody drinking a bottle of water, picking their nose or something. It's like that's the stuff that you kind of want to mess with, and otherwise, I think those things just.
Well, you see it on TV all the time where like you see shows where you have people that just stand in a room, 5 people, they have a conversation, they talk intensely, but they don't do anything physical. You know, that's stage business. You've got to have some sort of interaction. Otherwise, it's really boring again.
You can do. I mean, 2 people sitting in a room talking can still be dynamic, or you can do a lot with how you adjust your composition. Moving up. Again, it depends on the kind of conversation. You don't want a conversation should be super dynamic, so you're not going to allow low angle, high angle shots, that sort of thing. But yeah, you can still. There's a lot of little tricks you can do to make it a little more exciting.
Lots of shadow play.
A lot of shadow play.
Well,
Always fake the lighting.
Frank Miller's really good at that. Just look at what he does. He'll just do a bird's eye view or an extreme close up and a finger and let him talk and just keep going.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter.
Hey, you can cut away with a cup of coffee on the table or whatever.
A silhouette or a door sign and just talking.
Well, I think like Miller and Mazzucchelli on Year One,
Wow.
Like the Daredevil stuff. I feel like those were really masterclasses. Earlier, all the stuff you do to kind of get inspired. Like I love to, look at the new artist edition books, and they've got the Daredevil one.
Oh yeah.
And like I pull that out once a week.
Those tracings, those vellums that he's got.
It's so perfect. And you look at that stuff, and those small moments are always kind of awesome.
All right, we've got I think only maybe about 5 minutes left or so. Do you guys have questions? Anything that you want to ask? Yeah. Right here.
Jeremy and Freddie, you both specifically mentioned Scott McCloud. In his Understanding Comics, he talks about the transition, scene to scene, moment to moment, and so forth. When you are planning out a page, are you consciously thinking about transition types, or is that just something you've internalized?
Clarify what you mean by transition types. Is that something that he categorizes in the book?
Yeah, he's got the 6 transition types: moment to moment, scene to scene.
Okay, I don't.
I feel like that's something that we kind of I've read that, I know that, but like I don't get any.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
I think that because we've been doing this for 15 years now. It's like but it's like it's kind of second nature at this point. You just have to kind of that this is the way it comes.
All right. Anybody else? Good.
Yes, sir.
So do you guys have like, you guys are making panels like paper projects and stuff? Do you guys have archive panels, page layouts, you guys go back? Is it very well? In terms of like the flow of the story, what types of panels you have?
No, well, at least I don't. The closest to that is looking back at the well over 20 panels that always work. But that can really work with any sort of page or panel arrangement. Like, even though most of his, on that page, if you look it up online, because you can find it for free, most of those are relatively rectangular boxes, but you can apply the same sensibilities to like really tall vertical or really horizontal.
Right.
But I think the panel layout, you shouldn't be as reader blind to it. You know, you shouldn't get, I mean, I keep it as simple as possible. I just let the script dictate the panels. So you shouldn't be thinking about, as a reader, what the size of the panels are. It's actually what's happening within the panel, the composition of the panels. So I just, I let the script dictate what's happening. But no, I don't think it'd be more work to go back and look for templates for panels than just be the way to rule out some elements.
Okay. Yes.
What I find interesting is how, I guess, there's balance when to do too much, or how balance between the lot and not doing too much, I guess. Both for the detail in the panels and how many panels that you reach to get across an action. You talked about your strength, I guess, when you're drawing like
It's very loud over here. I didn't hear the last bit.
So you're asking, like, whenever you've got a page that has a lot of panels, how you're making the decision to how much detail goes into it, how clear?
versus 30 detail versus
When I speak about clarity, I mean clarity of story. You know what I mean? Like, not just detail is only important. It's important to the story. So, like, establishing shots are great. You want to be very clear on where everything's at. And then you can start dropping things out. And you do have to balance it. You've got a lot of panels on a page. You can't have every panel filled with background noise. It's just a mess. It's like a coffee bean. It's too much for the eye. And you'll know, especially look at manga, they always do like a really great establishing shot. And you don't even realize there's no backgrounds for like 3 pages. Because you're caught with the characters and what the story is and everything. So yeah, I'm still learning that part. I used to always draw way too much. I'm still learning when to drop stuff out and when to keep it in. But yeah, with if you have a lot of panels on the page, that's a balance you just have to. It's a design problem, it's a design challenge. So, I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but yeah.
I think we have 1 minute left. Yes.
So, like, when you get a script from a writer, and assuming that it doesn't have anything crazy or bombastic, like 3 armies meeting, like in a double splash, and it's just sort of easy to moderate scenes or panels to draw, do you prefer, like, a lot of specific details or instructions, or do you prefer to have it vague? Like, do you want the writer to say things like, oh, they need to be dressed in this type of shirt, or the room needs to look exactly like this architectural style, or do you want it to be more vague so you can sort of like play around and fill in blank spaces yourself?
Well, the shirt and the architectural stuff is important because those actually sound like there's story reasons for that, like why they would wear the type of shirt. Now, if they're picking camera angles where they're saying extreme low or extreme high, or a silhouette shot, I would still be okay with them doing that if they are okay with me deciding to do all of the lines. I want those things to be suggestions. What you just described, I think, are actually uncomfortable. But the rest I want them to be just sort of suggestions. I welcome a lot of detail as long as you're cool with me observing and not observing.
The detail is about the story, but the story based, that's fine. You start getting weird things where like people are like, in his left hand, he's holding a blah blah blah.
Don't direct.
Yeah. There is a point where it starts to get ridiculous. I think that you have to lay down enough information talking about what's going on to make it clear and make but the romantic idea that each panel should take an entire sheet of paper and print it out is ridiculous. There's no need for that information. I'm sorry, Alan.
All right, I think that's the end of our time. Thank you, guys. Give it up for our panelists.